Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for a deep dive into some like seriously weird old books?
Oh, I'm ready. I love weird, especially when it comes to old books. Always makes you wonder what they were thinking back then.
Right. And the books we're looking at today, well, let's just say they've gotten a lot of attention recently. You'll see why.
The thing is, these books, they were written over a century ago, but it's kind of freaky how they seem to echo some of the things we're worried about today.
It really is.
Y-
Okay, so we're talking about three books by this guy, Ingersoll Lockwood,
Okay,
Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and his wonderful dog Bulger.
catchy title.
Right. And then there's the sequel,
Of course there's a sequel.
Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey.
Underground Journey, huh? Sounds exciting.
Oh, it gets better. The third book, 1900, or The Last President.
Whoa, okay, now that's a title that grabs you.
Yeah, so get ready for some crazy adventures, a little dystopian future, and a whole lot of... Wait, did he just predict that?
I'm intrigued. Let's dive in. Where do we start?
Let's start with the Baron Trump series. Okay, you ready for this?
Yeah.
The main character,
Yeah.
this super wealthy kid, Baron Trump.
Baron Trump. Okay.
And he lives in, get this, Castle Trump.
Of course he lives in Castle Trump. Why wouldn't he? A castle. Only makes sense for a kid like that.
Right, and Baron's got this awesome dog, Bulger.
Every wealthy kid needs a loyal companion.
Totally. Plus, there's this mysterious mentor dude named Don who's always pushing Baron to, explore and stuff.
Lon, huh? That name rings a bell. One of those weird coincidences that makes you wonder.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to those coincidences. But first, let's talk about the first book, Travels and Adventures. Baron goes on all these crazy trips. We're talking exotic lands. He meets these transparent folk, and even goes to frozen land.
Frozen land? What is that, like the North Pole or something?
Well, it's not exactly clear, but it's definitely this far-off, mysterious place. And you know what's interesting? Lockwood actually uses that frozen land episode to kind of make fun of the way explorers used to treat other cultures.
Ah, so there's some deeper meaning hidden in these adventures.
Oh, yeah. Lockwood was clever like that. He was a master satirist. He could make you laugh, but also make you think.
I like that. Makes things more interesting.
Right. And so Baron, with his, super privileged upbringing, he totally messes up when he meets these frozen land people, makes all these cultural faux pas. Lockwood is holding up a mirror to, the whole idea of colonialism.
Yeah, using Baron's mistakes to make us laugh, but also challenging us to think about how we interact with different cultures.
Exactly. And that whole theme of challenging assumptions and confronting biases, it pops up again in the second book, Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. This is where things get really trippy.
Trippy how?
Baron actually goes underground. He's following these cryptic clues that his mentor, Don, left for him.
Sounds like a classic adventure setup. So what's he find underground?
Hold on to your hat. He ends up in this hidden world, way down deep beneath Russia.
Russia. Interesting choice.
Right. Lockwood's imagination was all over the place. But he was a really good writer, so he could make it work. So in this underground world, Baron meets these crazy societies, the Mick-men.
Mick-men. Okay, I have no idea what to picture.
They're these tiny people, super small, and they've got this whole different social structure, really complex. Then there are the Goggle Eyes. They're weird, too, with their own customs and ways of seeing things.
Tiny people, goggle eyes. This sounds like Lockwood was reading some Jules Verne or something.
Maybe, but it's not all just fantasy. Lockwood was using these crazy creatures to explore some pretty deep stuff, questions of power, social hierarchies. He was flipping the whole might makes right thing on its head. These tiny Mick-men, they might be small, but they've created this really just and balanced society.
Ah, so he's using the fantasy to critique the real world. Very clever.
Exactly. Yeah. The Mick-man and the Goggle Eyes, they force Baron to, really look at his own assumptions and recognize that different cultures have their own value, It's a theme that's still so relevant today. We could all use a little more understanding and empathy, right?
Amen to that. So we've got these two Baron Trump books full of adventure and satire, but then Lockwood throws a curveball with 1900, or The Last President.
Oh, yeah, that's where things take a dark turn. Seriously dark.
Dystopian future, huh? What's the setup?
It's New York City right after this super nasty election. Imagine the city in chaos, riots in the streets, especially around, get this, Fifth Avenue.
Fifth Avenue, the heart of the city. Why Fifth Avenue?
Well, back then, Fifth Avenue was the ultimate symbol of wealth and privilege. Lockwood was using it to show how even the elite, even those at the top, they're not safe when things start to fall apart.
So he's setting the stage for a story where everything's getting shaken up, the whole system's on the verge of collapse.
Exactly. And the way Lockwood describes these riots, it's vivid. Almost like he could see into the future. He captures that feeling of fear, uncertainty, that sense of what's going to happen next.
Like the world's spinning out of control and nobody knows how to stop it.
Exactly. It's like looking into a distorted mirror, seeing those anxieties about power, wealth, social change, all reflected back at us from over 100 years ago. Makes you wonder, how much has really changed?
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? And that's what Lockwood seems to be exploring in 1900. He's not just telling a story, he's looking at the cycles of history, at the way certain anxieties and patterns keep popping up over and over.
Right, it's like he's saying, hey, we've been here before, pay attention. So, we've got social unrest, a dystopian future, some seriously thought-provoking themes, but we haven't even touched on the weirdest part yet.
You mean those parallels with the Trumps?
Yeah, those. Like, how weird is it that Lockwood wrote about a Baron Trump who lives in Castle Trump over 100 years before?
Yeah.
You know?
It's definitely a coincidence, but it's one of those coincidences that makes you go, what's going on here?
Right. And then there's his mentor, Don, and even some stuff about Russia in the Baron Trump books. It's like Lockwood stumbled into some kind of time warp.
It's enough to make you think about those old sayings about history repeating itself.
Totally. And then you've got 1900 with its crazy election and all that social unrest. It's almost like Lockwood had a crystal ball or something.
Well, we can't say he predicted the future, but it's undeniable that these books have taken on a whole new layer of meaning in light of, recent events. They make you think about coincidence, about how stories can transcend time. It's pretty wild.
Wild is right.
Yeah.
Folks, we've just scratched the surface of Ingersoll Lockwood's world and those uncanny connections to our own time. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll go even deeper into those dystopian anxieties, explore Lockwood's brilliant satire, and try to unpack those strange Trumpian connections.
Welcome back. Ready to dig deeper.
Absolutely. There's so much to unpack with these books. Like, those dystopian anxieties in 1900, it's crazy how relevant they still feel.
Yeah.
Over 100 years later. And it's like he's talking about today.
Right. It's like some things never change. The fear of the unknown, that feeling that everything's about to fall apart, the anxiety about what happens when, the powers that be get challenged.
Yeah, like the whole system is teetering on the edge. And it's not just like physical chaos either. It's deeper. It's like society itself is, I don't know, coming undone.
Yeah, like the glue's not holding anymore.
Yeah.
And Lockwood, he really captures that feeling in 1900, that unease, that sense of things fraying at the edges.
Totally. Riots, political divisions, anxieties about the future, it's all there. And honestly, it feels even stronger now than it probably did back then. It's like he's holding up a mirror to our own time. Like all that stuff about political polarization, social media, the growing gap between people, it's kind of unsettling.
It is unsettling. And Lockwood, he doesn't shy away from that. His characters, they're dealing with real fear, uncertainty. They've lost something, and they don't know what's coming next.
It's funny, when I was reading 1900, what really struck me was how he uses New York City.
New York.
Yeah, he makes this dark, claustrophobic place full of shadows, secrets. It's not the glamorous New York you usually see.
Right. It's not that postcard version. It's like the city itself is on edge. That thin veneer of civilization. Lockwood makes you feel how fragile it is.
Totally. He uses all these vivid images, the gas lights, the crowded buildings, the whispers of conspiracies. It's like the city's a character, mirroring all those anxieties.
Exactly. It's breathing, it's alive, and it's not happy. And, those whispers of conspiracy, it's kind of eerie how relevant that feels today.
Oh, absolutely. With all the talk about fake news, misinformation, it's like Lockwood was way ahead of his time.
He was. No internet, no social media back then, but he got it. He understood how fear and uncertainty, they breed that kind of stuff, the rumors, the lies, and how people in power, they can use that, to manipulate people, sow division.
Yeah, it's like a warning from the past. Be careful what you believe. Think critically.
Yeah.
Especially when everyone's trying to appeal to your fears and your biases.
Right. Don't just swallow everything whole. Question things. That's what Lockwood is saying. And that's what makes him so brilliant. He's weaving in all these complex ideas, but he doesn't beat you over the head with it. It's still a good story, still entertaining.
He was a master of satire, too. The way he pokes fun at the elite, both in the Baron Trump books and in 1900. He doesn't hold back at all.
Oh, no, he goes right for it. Exposing the hypocrisy, the arrogance. He shows how ridiculous those in power can be. And in the Baron Trump books, he uses Baron's innocence, his privilege, to really highlight those excesses.
Like that scene in Travels and Adventures, when Baron tries to impress the transparent folk with his fancy clothes and expensive toys.
Oh yeah, classic Baron. So clueless.
It's hilarious, but it also makes you think about the whole idea of material wealth, how empty it can be, and those who chase it, how shallow they are.
Exactly. Lockwood, he deflates their pretensions. He's like, look, real worth, it's not about your money or your fancy castle.
And in 1900, the satire feels different, sharper, you know.
It's darker, for sure, reflecting that whole dystopian vibe. Lockwood's really looking at human nature here, the dark side of ambition and power.
It's like he's taking this magnifying glass to those in power, and he's not letting them get away with anything. Like that scene with the new president giving his inaugural address.
Surrounded by all those yes men telling him how great he is.
Yeah, and the speech itself, it's just empty promises and lies. You laugh, but it's that kind of uncomfortable laughter.
It's cringeworthy because you recognize it, right? It's that blind ambition, the ease with which people fall for charismatic leaders.
Yeah, Lockwood's showing us that gap between what people say and what they do,
Mm-hmm.
and how easy it is for people to get manipulated.
Right. He's reminding us, don't be passive, be critical, question authority, hold people accountable. It's a message that's, I don't know, maybe even more important today.
It really is. It's amazing how it all still feels so relevant. So we've talked about the dystopia, the satire, the relevance to today, but there's still that big elephant in the room.
The Trump connections.
Exactly.
Mm.
We can't ignore those.
Definitely not. They're part of what makes these books so fascinating, so let's dive into them.
Okay, so we're back, and it's time to face the elephant in the room, right? Those Trump connections. We've danced around it long enough.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore, isn't it? A Baron Trump living in Castle Trump over 100 years before Donald Trump. It's just, wow.
Right. And then there's Dawn, the mentor, and even some stuff about Russia in those Baron Trump books.
Makes you wonder if Lockwood had a secret time machine tucked away somewhere.
I know. I was talking to a friend about these books, and they were like, Lockwood was totally psychic. He saw it all coming.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. We can't say he was predicting the future, obviously, but it's definitely one of those things that makes you think, like, what are the chances?
Right. It's like a weird portal opened up between the past and the present.
Exactly. It makes you think about how history repeats itself, how some themes just keep coming back around. And I think that's one of the coolest things about reading old books.
Totally. It's like looking at our own time through this, like, distorted lens. So how do we make sense of these Trump connections? Coincidence? Something more? What do you think?
Honestly, I think it's both. It's a coincidence, sure, but it's also become more than that.
Right. Like, we can appreciate how weird it is without, going overboard and saying Lockwood was some kind of prophet.
Exactly. But what it does show is that literature, it's not just stuck in the past. It changes, it takes on new meaning as time goes on, depending on who's reading it.
So Lockwood's books, they're like this cultural mirror, reflecting back at us whatever we're obsessed with at the moment.
Exactly. And right now, that happens to be, well, the Trumps. But here's the thing. Lockwood's books, they're still relevant, even if you take away those connections.
Because he was writing about stuff that's timeless.
Mm-hmm.
The need for adventure, the fear of the unknown, anxieties about the future, all that stuff.
Right. He was tapping into something that's always been a part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And that's why these books still resonate with people today.
Okay, so wrapping things up. For our listeners out there, why should they care about these 19th century novels, even if they don't care about the Trump stuff?
Because they're a window into another time. They show us that people back then, they were dealing with a lot of the same things we're dealing with now. It's a reminder that history, it's not just dates and names in a textbook. It's a story full of drama and intrigue.
And sometimes those stories, they feel surprisingly familiar, like they're speaking directly to us. It's kind of spooky, actually.
It is, but it's also exciting. It means we can learn from the past, maybe avoid making the same mistakes.
Absolutely. So, big takeaway, don't be afraid to dive into some old books. You never know what you might find.
You might be surprised at how relevant they still are.
Totally. Keep those deep dives going, everyone. We'll see you next time.